So I'm walking around the deserts of Dashur at the foot of the Red Pyramid with the Bent Pyramid, a couple miles away. This is supposedly the funerary monument of the king Seneferu during his rather obsessive streak of building these gigantic monumental pyramids. But one of the main mysteries here is, walking all around the base of the Red Pyramid, there's not really any funerary monuments like you see in previous necropoli, like the Pyramid of Dashur. What's up? Here's Land of Chem.
What's up, everybody?
So we were talking about one of the strange things here is that, Seneferu supposedly is building this pyramid and going on this rather obsessive streak of building these giant monumental pyramids. But there's no decoration inside like you see at Saqqara in commemoration of King Dashur. There's no turquoise scarabs decorating the walls meant to look like the king's palace during his life. There's nothing like that here. It's totally different, and it goes on for the Maidum Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid, the Red Pyramid, Khufu's Pyramid, Khafre's Pyramid, Menkare's Pyramid. It's just a total mystery. What do you think?
So another question about the Seneferu three-pyramid burial hypothesis is, why start out in the Fayum Oasis? So the Pyramid of Maidum is located in the Fayum Oasis, which is like an hour and a half, 2-hour drive from where we are here in Dashur. So he built this massive pyramid, the Pyramid of Maidum, in the Fayum Oasis, which had catastrophic collapse of the exterior casing stones, which basically brought the whole construction process and the entire pyramid crashing down. And then he restarted the process here in Dashur with what they say started with the Bent Pyramid. And you'll see here in just a minute when we walk up towards there, the execution of the architectural design is immaculate. And I think it's a really unfortunate myth about the construction of the Bent Pyramid that this was somehow a mistake in the engineering or design phase, that they had to change the taper at the top. It's actually very intentional, because the slope angle of the top of the Bent Pyramid is exactly the same as what you see here in the Red Pyramid. You could take this one and sit it on the top and it's the exact same slope angle. So that slope angle is mimicked between these two structures. And again, I think it's a very unfortunate misunderstanding about the construction of the Bent Pyramid, that was somehow an architectural or engineering error. And then they came over here and built this one. And I think you'll agree that looking at these two, after seeing what we saw on the Giza Plateau, that these are just as impressive as anything on the Giza Plateau.
Yeah, I totally feel the same way. I also love just the setting of this, that it's out here in the desert. It feels like you're in an ancient place. Yeah, this is really amazing. Giza was indescribable how monumental and colossal everything is there, in the density. You're walking around Giza and it's like everywhere you look there's something new to see. But being out here in the desert of Dashur at the foot of the pyramid and there's nobody here, this feels like I'm standing in a very ancient place. So during the 3 weeks that I spent in Egypt last month, I had the pleasure of first meeting up with a friend that I had had online for a little while. His name is Jeffrey Drum, but you may know him as the Land of Chem. And essentially, his entire thesis is that the pyramids of ancient Egypt, or at least most of them, were actually alchemical factories. And while I really have no comprehensive understanding at all of surrounding his theories, he was gracious enough to meet up with me and actually take me all the way around Giza and Saqqara for the first couple days that I was there. And he was the best tour guide that I could have asked for.
So we were just discussing this red coating compound that we have chemical analysis detailing the exact chemical composition of this coating compound. And it's all over several casing stones on the eastern side and also on the capstone, well, the remaining pieces of the original capstone that now make up this replica capstone on the east side. And the last time we were out here, we happened to find this. So this is an original edge piece of the casing stone. So imagine this piece of casing being an edge piece that went up the side of the pyramid. And you can see here on this edge piece that both sides of the edge were originally painted with this red coating compound. And the coating compound is a mixture of 3 different chemicals. It's silicon dioxide, sulfur trioxide, and aluminum trioxide, which created a chemical and corrosion resistant coating compound that once covered the entire exterior of the structure. With the paint on both sides, other than the actual erosion of the stone itself, which has weathered away a lot of it. But here you can see on this edge the red paint and the remnants on the other side. And it's really cool to envision this piece sitting in its original position on the edge of the red pyramid. All right, so we're talking about the mechanisms of operation that go into the function of the red pyramid. And in my hypothesis, I've proposed step-by-step mechanisms that create the chemical reaction inside of these chambers. So we're starting with the water filling process. And you can see here on the lower portion of the chamber, there is a staining pattern that is indicative of the fluid dynamics that were involved in the first stage of the reaction process. And we've actually duplicated this fluid dynamic pattern in a series of experiments where we introduced water into a scale model of the chamber through the inlet shaft here at the bottom of the descending shaft, and the water flows into the first chamber here, as you can see with this staining pattern. It then crashes up into this wall, creating the wave formation that you can see here. The wave then drops down and continues around the chamber, as you can see here, and then crashes back up into this wall with the wave pattern that you can see here. And again, we've replicated this exact same pattern in a series on my channel called the Red Pyramid Fluid Dynamics Experiments, where we had a tub with the same dimensions of the lower portion of chamber 1 here inside the Red Pyramid. We introduced water through the proposed inlet shaft, and it created this exact same circulation and wave pattern where it crashes up into each corner as it fills up the lower portion of the chamber. And the next thing to point out is the nebulous staining. So all of this staining on the walls of the Red Pyramid has been proven with a series of chemical analyses to be a mixture of metal oxides. So it's iron oxide, strontium, zinc, copper. We've found elevated concentrations of lead in a few areas, which we'll show you here in just a moment. But these staining also contain trace radioactive metals like thorium. And you can see here when we get to the 1, 2, 3rd tier is where the staining gets very, very dark. And the staining gets darker as you get to the upper portion of the chamber. And if you turn around, just follow this 3rd tier, you can see the dark staining on the edge of the 3rd tier. So the 1st tier, there's nothing on the edge here, nothing on the edge here. But when you get to the 3rd tier, again here, it's almost a perfect line going across the 3rd tier. That is the 2nd stage of the chemical reaction series.
I have to say, I like Land of Kim's ideas about these, when you hear a lot of alternate theories about what the pyramid's usages could have been rather than just a simple royal tomb, sometimes the explanations seem rather impractical, whereas his ideas seem like something that elevates the status of Egypt. It makes Egypt more powerful. It gives Egypt, chemical processes that help agriculture or help Egypt's economy. It helps elevate Egypt above the rest of the ancient world, which is what the pyramids would have been used for regardless of their true function. But I like this idea. Oh, this is cool. The smell is very strong.
And it's emanating from the third chamber, which is the actual final synthesis of the ammonia solution. So by ammonia solution, I mean ammonia gas dissolved into water. Today, in our modern industrial ammonia manufacturing process, we make liquid ammonia, which is ammonia gas that has then been supercooled and turned into a liquid form. But the ancient process was a lot simpler by simply dissolving gaseous ammonia into water to produce an aqueous solution of ammonia, very similar to what you would have under your kitchen sink. Household ammonia is an aqueous solution of gaseous ammonia dissolved in water. And you'll notice here in the second chamber, again, we go up to the third tier, that very clear delineation of staining starts precisely at the third tier. And look at how dark it gets in this portion of the chamber up here. Because again, as you're compressing the gases into the upper portion of the chamber, the temperature and the pressure of the reaction are increasing, which is creating more of these extrusions coming out of the stone. So that's what these drip stains are. It is liquefied material that is being extruded out of the stone due to fluctuations of pressure inside of the chamber. So imagine a sponge. A sponge is going to have a bunch of liquid inside of it. This is stone, and the stone doesn't have liquids in it, but it has metal oxides that are heated to a certain temperature that liquefy the material. And the fluctuations of pressure inside of the chamber cause these drip stainings to form on the walls. And again, you'll see that the concentration of the staining is much greater in the areas of the chamber that experience the greatest fluctuations in pressure. So this is where things kind of get interesting in terms of the chemical analysis. When we get to the top of the stairs, that's where we find the highest concentrations of lead and zinc in the holes at the top of the chamber. We always bring a UV light in here just so you can see the staining under the UV light. And you can see the glow of the material. And these holes are bilateral, meaning that they are in the same location on both sides of the chamber. And the photos from the original, not original excavations, but the original restoration and some early 1900s photos show that this entire wall was completely covered in those geological extrusion stains. Now, unfortunately, this entire wall is covered up with the staircase that we'll use to access the third and final chamber. Again, kind of the fallacy about the pharaonic burial hypothesis is not only the difficulty of getting your pharaonic burial down inside this structure, you then have to haul it all the way up here to the third and final chamber, which would be completely inaccessible without this staircase system. So there would certainly be some challenges in getting your pharaoh body down inside of this structure. And I think Luke would agree, having been inside of here, it certainly has more of an industrial feel than it does a pharaonic burial.
So right now we're going up the staircase in Seneferu's red pyramid up to the third and final chamber. Here behind me you can see the corbelled ceilings that you also see in the Grand Gallery of the Great Pyramid.
So before you go further, Luke, check this out. These bilateral housings here on each side. And there's not only drip staining coming down, but also above. So if this was coming from bats, how are they then producing this drip staining? And how are they creating this line that moves all the way across the chamber? Here you can really see how dark the staining is in the upper portion of the vault here. And this sample location in this housing here had extremely high concentrations of lead compared to all of the other sample locations. And you'll notice also, if you turn around here, look at how black and dark the staining is on all of these walls here. Right above the connecting passage. And then here on this side is some of the densest concentration of the staining in the entire structure, which is an indication that this area of the reactor is the one that experienced the highest fluctuations of temperature and pressure. Highest temperature being achieved, and also the biggest differences in high pressure and low pressure.
All right, so now we are entering the main final chamber of the Red Pyramid. Oh, wow.
So as I was saying, this was the original level of the floor, going across the entire chamber here. So the floor and this entire pit was excavated out of this structure. And then again, looking up into the upper vault, you'll see that concentration of the staining here in the upper vault. So as we were talking about yesterday, the satellite pyramid of the Great Pyramid, G1A, anytime there are these massive efforts to excavate, there had to be a good reason for them to start hauling out all these stones. This is a massive amount of work to excavate all of this material from the chamber. So what was in here that gave them the idea that, okay, we're going to start digging here and we're going to excavate out all of these stones out of the chamber in an effort to find something? So there was something in here that was the impetus for the decision to decide to do all of this work.
What do you think that was?
The outlet shaft. And they were following that shaft in search of the next burial chamber, the actual burial chamber, because no burial was ever found inside here.
Now, you guys all know that I believe that the pyramids in Egypt were being used as tombs one way or another, but I like Land of Kim's alternate explanation as well, because he incorporates something that most other alternative theories do not, and it is just a common sense means by which these pyramids would greater benefit the Egyptian people, whether that be agriculture or chemicals that they need, something that stimulates Egypt's economy. It makes some kind of practical sense, much more than some other alternate explanations.
So one of the things that I think about is when this chamber was constructed, it was probably the largest room in the entire world. The significance of this room just can't be understated. It was the largest, the most important room chamber on the entire planet when it was constructed, made out of huge blocks. Nothing had been made like this before this era. Look at the size of this stone here. Comes all the way to here. Actually, it goes all the way back there. Absolutely colossal room. Now, what's really interesting about this is that this room is actually raised up above the chamber that's down there by some 20 feet or so. And while this looks like a path that's easy to walk through without hitting your head, this really was more like a square tunnel, because all of this right here was actually quarried out to make it easier to walk through. Originally, it would have been about this tall. But everything down here, you can see all these chisel marks. All of this was quarried and carried out to make it easier to access.
So also, it was most likely lowered to facilitate the removal of extracted material from
Right.
the chamber.
Yeah.
Another hypothesis is that they actually found something in there that was too large for them to remove through the shaft, so they had to expand the connecting passage to haul out whatever it was that was removed from that chamber.
I have to admit, there were so many things that he pointed out to me about the three great pyramids on the Giza Plateau, as well as the pyramids at Dashur, that I really had no idea about, and certain elements of the interiors of the pyramids that I had never considered before. And I think that if Land of Chem is right, and even just one site in Egypt, well, you were talking about a major discovery.
Now, something that is also amazing about this architecture is the invention of the corbelled ceiling. Now, the Egyptians are using either throughout early dynastic history or even pre-dynastic history, they're either using modestly sized stones, or they're using absolutely colossal stones. But at the very, very beginning of this early architecture, the idea of constructing a huge open roof was in its infancy. And so something that they would do is they would stack these stones on top of each other, and then they would just barely have a lip hanging out in front of the other. And you can see behind me, Jeff is illuminating it. And so they just ever so slightly allow the block on top of the next, or on top of the below block, to hang out above it. And it creates this huge arched corbelled ceiling. And it was obviously revolutionary in its time, the very, very first time anything like that had ever been done. So walking through here is a great example of how it's just so strange that this is a pharaonic burial, because Seneferu's burial chamber would have been all the way up there, and we don't have the remnants or the evidence of a staircase once leading up there in ancient times. But to get his body through here, you would have had to crouch through these small tunnels. And it just seems extremely cumbersome to be able to get the sacred body of the pharaoh, the most powerful person living on the planet, through here into his burial chamber. This time last week, I was at my day job, and I quit my job and flew out to Egypt to meet up with Land of Chem, traveling around looking at Egypt's most ancient, most monumental sites. It doesn't feel real. It feels very surreal. And I'm very, very fortunate to be here. Thank you.
Well, that was my exploration of the Red Pyramid at Saqqara with Land of Chem. He has great connections and a great reputation in Egypt, and he has fully committed his life to living in Egypt for the last 2 years to further flesh out his theories. So I have a great amount of respect for him, and I totally 100% think that he is honestly interpreting the data as he sees it. If you guys would like to see more of Land of Chem, I will leave his page linked in the comment section and the description below. I'm Luke Caverns. If you'd like more videos exploring ancient sites in Egypt, well, I'm going to be back in Egypt just next month. So if you'd like more, all you have to do is like and subscribe, as that's really all you have to do to help out the channel.